The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
I think we can safely say this is not going to be a sexy spring for sports in the Washington, D.C. area. I guess the big event coming up next is Commanders minicamp. Yeah, it's kind of that way. If you're thinking about the Orioles turning things around like the Nationals did in 2019, I was at Camden Yards yesterday. I think we can forget about that. Nationals, maybe a 500 team at best. I don't think they're any threat to be in the playoffs. Capital season is over. The Wizard season has ended with a thud. Number 6 in the lottery. Some years we can get excited about sports in the spring around here. This clearly is not one of them. And if you consider yourself to be an Orioles fan, you adopted the Orioles when we didn't have baseball here for 33 years, and I really never became a Nationals fan, I feel for you because they are a mess. They fired the manager over the weekend. That didn't do any good. They gave up 20 runs over the last 2 games, and on a absolutely gorgeous Sunday afternoon with a chance to at least salvage 1 game from the series, C.J. Abrams hit the first pitch of the game out of the ballpark, and it was on for the Nats as they won 10-4. My wife has a cousin by marriage who's done very well, and he's very, very generous. He buys a package of sweets for the season. By that, I mean he gets a suite for about 10 games, I think, something like that. And he invites friends and family, and we were lucky enough to be invited yesterday. We had all the amenities, Books, pit beef, and we had the crab cakes and the bathroom right there and all the beer and soda and water that you wanted and desserts. I mean, that's living. And as a Nats fan, yeah, I was living yesterday. As an Oriole fan, like my wife's cousins and my wife, not so much. And I mean, this is a complete meltdown and just an absolute, not surprise because there were signs from last year that they were going to be struggling, especially if they had some injuries. But just a complete disappointment. And we'll get to that and what some of the experts are saying about the Orioles and where they are right now. But we did have the PGA Championship, and after the blowout yesterday, driving home, I'm thinking, okay, I got the opportunity to watch the close of 2 big events. PGA Championship, that could be close, coming down the wire. And we had Oklahoma City and Denver playing in Game 7 to get to the Western Conference Finals, and that turned out to be a complete laugher as Oklahoma City won the game 125-93, and it really wasn't that close. I think it was like 40 points in the fourth quarter. And so what's going to be tough for the NBA is if the Knicks don't beat the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, I'm rooting for Indiana. My friend Mark Boyle has done their games, I think, 37 years, and he's never broadcast a championship. They made the finals once, maybe twice over those years, but they didn't win the title. It would be really cool to see him get a championship and see that town get a championship. I'm a little familiar with it, having seen my son go to Indiana, and I was in Indianapolis a number of times while he was there. So I think that would be a really nice thing. But the NBA, you're looking at a finals if Indiana gets there, playing either Oklahoma City or Minnesota, 2 of the smallest markets in the league, along with Indiana. So they really need the Knicks to make this happen. And if there are some close games, you're going to hear conspiracy theories out the wazoo. As for the PGA Championship, when I got home, it was relatively close. Looked like John Rahm and Scottie Scheffler were going to battle it out. I think Scheffler was only up by a shot, maybe 2 shots. And then Rahm just totally collapsed over the last 3 holes. And Scheffler, who had a tough time on the front 9, got it rolling on the back 9, and he wound up winning by 5 strokes, even bogeyed the last hole to finish at 11 under par, 5 shots ahead of Harris English and Bryson DeChambeau and Davis Riley. And he's been criticized for being boring. And he is, the straight-laced family guy. But you also got to look at a couple of things that have happened. Remember last year, going to the PGA Championship in Louisville for the first round, he was arrested and the charges were later dropped. The mayor had to get out of bed and make sure that everything was smoothed over, and they got him into the golf course in time to make his tee time. But that had to be unnerving. He didn't win. He did compete, but didn't win. And this time he closed it out and talked on the Golf Channel about how he got it done.
You famously were sort of overwhelmed on the morning of the final round of the first major you were trying to win in 2022 at the Masters. This is your third major championship. Are the mornings of the final round, are they getting easier for you?
I mean, I don't know if easier would be the right word. You know, when I think about the morning of the Masters in 22, I think really everything was happening so fast at that time. You know, I played my first Ryder Cup in September the year before, but I still hadn't won on tour until that February. And then all of a sudden, you know, I win 3 times in a very short span. I get to number 1 in the world, and all of a sudden I have a chance to win my first major championship. And not only is it a major championship, but it's the Masters. And you know, my wife and I are kind of sitting there in the morning, and we're thinking, like, are we really ready for this? Is this really where things are going now? And it was more of that type of feeling than it was, can I really win this tournament? It was more of are we ready for what this means and all that it'll come in terms of life change and stuff like that. And what Mayor told me that morning was, who's to say that I'm in control of what's going to happen. And so, here we are a few years later, and are they getting easier? I mean, I don't know. I think the mornings are always the toughest. It's easier to come out here and play golf than it is to sit around and think about playing golf. It's kind of like when you're at a team event, you're watching somebody else play. It's easier to be in control, hitting the shots, than it is to be sitting on the sidelines.
Tell us about the last 24 hours, Scottie. So you played great yesterday. What a finish you had. We saw you hitting some balls last night. Why hit some balls after such a good day?
Yeah, you and I seem to differ on this practicing after the round thing. I don't know why that is.
I'm about energy levels, but listen, what do I know compared to you?
No, it's not one of the. It's part of my routine typically. Like, so I don't love to have to go to the range after, but for instance, this week, after the first 2 rounds, like, I had to go to the range because I wasn't swinging at my best, and it just became part of my routine for the week. And I wanted to hit a couple balls, kind of decompress is how I would describe it, and hit a few putts and then go home and relax.
Right. Okay, so you go back. How does it feel sleeping on a big lead with a lot of pressure on you, people expecting you to win? What kind of sleep did you have last night? How did you wake up this morning?
Yeah, I actually got to sleep in a bit, which was unusual for me. Mare this week she kind of took care of Bennett for a little bit. I slept a little past 8, which was nice. I was pretty tired when I got home, and after practicing I got home late last night, and we went out, got some coffee this morning, relaxed a bit at home, read, chatted a bit, and it was a bit of I would say an anxious morning. I was excited to come out here and play, and it's weird sitting at home waiting because you don't know if it's going to be a great day or if it's going to be a really hard day, and that's kind of just the weird feeling of the game, and it's kind of.
Did you have a good 7-8 hours sleep last night?
Oh yeah, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, I slept probably from like 10:30, 11 to a little past 8.
Wonderful.
I get pretty worn out. I got a kid at home, so anytime I get some extra sleep, it's a good thing. But
and just moving on to the tournament then, I mean, one of the things I admire about you most is your competitiveness. Probably the most thing I admire about you. I know your game is fabulous, but your ability to reset, Scottie. I mean, this bounce-back ability stat, you dominate that. You've had 10 bogeys this week, and you've bounced back 6 times, making a birdie after those bogeys. It's a phenomenal thing to do. I know as a golfer how hard it is and how easy it is to spiral when you make one mistake to roll into another mistake. You don't seem to do that. You do that better than anybody else. Is there anything that you do psychologically to change that, or something that you work on, or is it just part of your makeup that, I'm going to drop a shot, I'm not going to drop anymore, I'm going to get it back?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think it's frustrating. Anytime you make a mistake out there, I think it's pretty frustrating, especially on a golf course like this where, I mean, mistakes are going to happen, but it's all about, in major championship golf, I feel like it's limiting your mistakes. And so a week like this, for me to be able to bounce back like I did, I think is extremely important. I mean, it's nice to kind of grab that momentum back, because sometimes, like you said, when you make one mistake, sometimes it can feel easier to make a few immediately after that. And it all depends on how you respond to things. And this week, I think that's what I'm most proud of is how we responded to kind of the bad stuff that happened out there, and put up a good fight over 4 days.
That's Scottie Scheffler after winning his 3rd major PGA championship yesterday. And like I say, he doesn't show much emotion, but once he wrapped it up, he took his hat and he spiked it on the green. Okay, that's not going nuts, but that's a little more than we've seen out of him. Now, he is the best player in the world. He's number 1. And by winning a 3rd major at, 26, 27, he's he cemented himself already among the greats of the game. And now you look at the possibilities of how many he can win. Can he get on a Tiger Woods type of roll? And even if he does, what does that mean for the game of golf? It wasn't just that Tiger was great and winning tournament after tournament and major after major. It was that he was different. He looked different than what we had seen with golfers. He was of color. He identified himself as a Cablinasian, but, it was thought that people now of color would have an opportunity, and there were some things that opened up with, public programs and things like that, and there would be a boom of golfers who looked like Tiger Woods. Well, it hasn't happened. And along the way, Tiger Woods not only became such a great golfer, but became a lightning rod. And then when he is at the top of the world, he has shown us just how tough he can be as he beats Rocco Mediate in the U.S. Open in 2009, playing on a broken leg where he's got to use his golf club as like a crutch to get out of the bunker. And guts it out with an extra day. You remember that? Because they don't have sudden death in U.S. Open, so they have to go to the extra day, and that goes more than 18 holes, and he finds a way to win. And okay, that's July. Well, Thanksgiving, everything changes, and he has the incident with his now ex-wife, which leads to just scandalous this, scandalous that. Oh my God, look at them. And he doesn't win again until he wins the Masters in 2019? Yeah, 2019 is when he finally won the Masters again. And, they thought, okay, maybe he can get back on track and maybe we get past Jack Nicklaus, because there was a period of time where it looked like it was for certain he would pass Jack Nicklaus in winning 18, 19 majors. But he has not done that. And then he has the broken leg in that car accident, which is mysterious to this day. Scottie Scheffler doesn't seem to have any of that. It doesn't seem, if he gets on a roll, and there's a big if. There's an enormous gap between 3 majors for Scottie Scheffler and the 18 majors that Jack Nicklaus won. So essentially, he's got to do what he just did 5 times more over the rest of his career, win 3 majors. It's very unlikely. But what does it mean for the game of golf if he becomes that guy? And we always do this. Maybe it was going to be Rory McIlroy. Rory McIlroy was a young kid when he won the U.S. Open here in 2011. We thought, what if Rory McIlroy gets on a run? Okay, yeah, well, it didn't happen. He's been excellent, and he just won the Masters, but he hasn't been the dominant player. And as golf searches for that, and look, like, this is not new. I remember going back to the 1970s, late 1970s, that people looked at Tom Watson as that guy. Okay, Jack is ready to pass the torch, and Tom Watson is going to be the dominant player in the game. And while he was a great player and he won multiple majors, he never became Jack Nicklaus. And then Jack wins in 1986 at the age of 46. I believe it was 46 when he won the Masters. And okay, that was a great last hurrah. Who's taking the torch? Who's going to take it from here? And as I remember, because I was there, this was at Shinnecock Hills for the U.S. Open in 1986. It was Raymond Floyd. And Raymond Floyd was about Jack Nicklaus's age in 1986 when he won that. So the old war horses still had something left in the tank, and we were still searching for that guy. And it wasn't until over a decade later that guy came along in Tiger Woods. If Scottie Scheffler is that guy, if he becomes golf's dominant player and wins majors on a regular basis and starts flirting with a Grand Slam in the same year, what does it mean? Because he's vanilla. There's nothing there where people who are not necessarily of the golf watching set can gravitate to. Tiger Woods was that. He was that guy. Jack was really in the shadow of Arnold Palmer. Jack Nicklaus was a better golfer than Arnold Palmer, but Arnold Palmer was sexy. He was the first guy on TV that women would tune in to see him. He had the cigarette in his mouth, and he'd hitch up his pants, and he was always in trouble and shooting out of the rough and things. It was exciting. Scheffler, not that guy. So it's fun to speculate what will happen over the coming years. And again, we have seen great golfers come and win majors and cement themselves among the greats of the game. But to be considered on that Mount Rushmore, to make the run at Jack Nicklaus, who remains the GOAT, there's no question about that. I mean, you can argue who was the better golfer over a period of a decade. Probably Tiger Woods. Who was the better golfer over the period of a career? It's Jack Nicklaus. You know, he's got 4 more majors or 3 more majors than Tiger Woods. And without all the problems, Tiger certainly would have surpassed him. But all the problems that he had, particularly off the course, mostly off the course, that's what has resulted in what we have here. All right, we will get to the Orioles and their mess. Also, the Capitals had locker clean out over the weekend. Some interesting thoughts from Tom Wilson and Alex Ovechkin. Will this be Ovechkin's last year? Coming up, maybe, maybe not. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Hey, if you're just jumping in your car, I mentioned at the top that we were at the Orioles game yesterday, guests of Cousins, and it was really, really nice to sit in a luxury box. I'm not going to lie about that. I don't do it that very often. I understand, and I'm very appreciative of that. It's a whole different ball game, truly, to watch that. But it was rough for the crowd that was hosting because most of them were wearing orange Orioles T-shirts, and I was dressed in my Nationals red. There was another couple there who were Nationals fans, so the 3 of us kind of celebrated, but all the others in the box, including my wife, rooting for the Orioles, who are really a mess right now. And you had kind of the feeling when the Orioles won 2 years ago, when they not won, but made the playoffs finally, that it was back-to-back 110-loss seasons, going through the process of what they had to do. And they had the 2 young stars, and Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson, and they were ready to take kind of the local torch and take it from the Nationals, who were no longer going to be contenders, and, maybe make a run at a World Series and win like the Nats did in 2019. And the last 2 years, while they've made the playoffs, they have been swept in their first-round series. But this year, you figure, okay, you get your lumps and you learn, and there's no ownership. And remember, it was last year that David Rubenstein took over just before the start of the season. So it was kind of like the same thing here with the Josh Harris group in 2023, where they really didn't have time to do anything, and they wrote it out, and, things got a hell of a lot better in their first full year of ownership. Well, that's not going to happen with David Rubenstein. While he seems to be a very good man and very philanthropic in Washington and good at everything he does, he's having a hard time right now picking up this baseball thing. And he didn't make the change, and it's funny, 2 years ago, Mike Elias was the executive of the year in baseball, and Brandon Hyde was the manager of the year in baseball. And now Brandon Hyde is gone. And if you read social media, Mike Elias is just getting torched for the team that they're putting on the field right now. They have the 2nd worst record in the American League. They have the 3rd worst record in baseball. And over the weekend was just awful. Never mind the last 2 games where they gave up 10 runs in each of them. And yesterday they gave up 5 homers, including C.J. Abrams, who hit the first pitch of the game out of the ballpark, and it was pretty much downhill there for the Orioles. But, just look at where they are and how they're losing. They lost a 1-run game on Friday night, but became the first team to lose a 9-inning game with 20 base runners and only 3 runs and 15 left on base. Closer Felix Bautista, where his velocity was down, and remember, he's coming off missing a full year because of Tommy John. He had no strikeouts on his 20 pitches, or no strikes on his 20 pitches, and he allowed the winning run to score from second base on a ground ball to first as he showed no alertness on the trail runner while covering the bag. It was about as bad as it possibly could be. And right after the game, or early on Saturday, they made the move. Brandon Hyde was fired, and they replaced him with his one of his coaches, Tony Mansolino, who has a tough task here of trying to salvage the season, which seems to be going nowhere. Rock Kabatko covers the Orioles for Masson. He talked to one of their broadcasters, Melanie Newman, about this change that was made on Saturday.
It's happened a few times. It's not real common, but Sam Perlazzo, June 2007, Dave Tremblay, June 2010. It would be very easy to just say, well, who didn't see this coming? The 13 games below 500, supposed to be a World Series contender, 10.5 games out of first place, really struggling in multiple facets of the game right now. They're just not playing good baseball. But there's always on the other hand. And trust me, the Orioles are fully aware that this isn't all on Brandon Hyde. You don't replace half the roster. They felt like they had to shake something up. This man's had 3 straight winning seasons, back-to-back playoffs, won the division in 100 games only 2 years ago. Yeah. And, 2-time Sporting News Manager of the Year. BBWAA finally got it right on the 1 year. So this was not a slam dunk obvious decision. Also, with new ownership, David Rubenstein, his group, we don't have a track record. So we did not know whether something like this would happen in season, in May, if it would be maybe end of the season or it would happen at all. So, I guess you're not blown away, shocked when you come in and find out. But certainly I wasn't braced thinking it was going to happen this soon.
Yeah, the remark is always that you can't fire players. It's ultimately the staff that pay the price. And there were several players in that clubhouse very aware of those consequences and putting it on themselves. How do you watch those teams pivot, though, especially mid-season, in terms of that player self-responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guilt in there today. I mean, guys are saying, like, to a man that, feel like they let him down. They have the utmost respect for him. They really like him. They know how much he loves his players. So they feel badly. If they had played better, then he would still be here. One of them said that, it sucks because we were sucking or something to that effect. So this is why this happened. But you never know. It's not like they took off when Juan Samuel took over for Dave Tremblay. I mean, or maybe it does kind of refocus them and energize, not that they weren't playing hard before, but maybe there's more of that sense of urgency. Like, look, people are losing their jobs now, and it's still a lot of season left. And they still feel like they're good enough to make the postseason. They're going to get healthier. So there could be that feeling as well as like, look, we have to step up now because 2 men that they really respected and did their jobs well are no longer here. So that could actually have that positive effect. Why else would you do this unless you thought that it would shake things up?
That's Rock Kabatko. Masson on Saturday. That was before the Orioles gave up 10 runs and lost on Saturday, and 10 runs and lost on Sunday. Tom Verducci, writing about this change at SI.com, writes, the Orioles should not be this bad, but they were overrated as a contender. This was not a playoff team to start the year, in my estimation. The glow of the breakout 2023 season has long been gone, especially after a miserable trade deadline performance. Eloy Jimenez, Trevor Rogers, really, followed by a lousy offseason. Charlie Morton to replace Corbin Burns, Tyler O'Neill, and Gary Sanchez. Oof. The development of many young players, especially Adley Rutschman, who was picked ahead of Bobby Witt Jr. in 2019, Elias's first draft, has stalled. In the past 133 games, the Orioles are 57-76. Since April of last year, they are 0-56 when trailing by 4 runs. This year, they are 0-25 when trailing after 6 innings. The team batting average has hit an all-time low in the DH era, 230. Only the Rockies and the Marlins have a worse ERA, 5.30. Sure, you can point to injuries to Colton Cowser, Jordan Westberg, Grayson Rodriguez, Andrew Kittredge, but name me a team that doesn't deal with injuries. That's why you build a team with depth. The Orioles have done a poor job building depth, especially on the pitching side. They have earned every bit of their 15-30 record, the first time that they have been 15 under 500 since 2021. The depth of their rebuild. Only 2 teams have recovered from a 43-game start this bad to make the postseason: the 1914 Miracle Braves and the 2005 Houston Astros. Baltimore doesn't have anything close to the kind of pitching staff to play 600 ball the rest of the way required to make that possible. And look, to get to 19-31, which is where the Nats were Memorial Day weekend of 2019 before they turned it around and went on to win the World Series, the Orioles at this point would have to go 4-1 over their next 5 games just to get out of Memorial Day weekend like that. And remember, when the Nationals were 19-31, they were asking Mike Rizzo, okay, is it time to make a change? You ready to dump Davey Martinez? He didn't do it. He stuck with Martinez. The Orioles have not waited. 2 years, again, after Brandon Hyde was named Manager of the Year, he's out. More from the Tom Verducci story here. David Rubenstein and his $4.1 billion net worth were supposed to rescue Oriole fans from the slow decline under the ownership of the Angelos family. Rubenstein did increase the payroll, but did so more on the margins for players such as O'Neill, 3 years, $49.5 million. A platoon player who is hurt so often he has taken 500 plate appearances in a season just once and is hitting .188 this year. He goes on to say the demise of the 2024-25 Orioles in the window that was never is an example of the front office's need to stop talking about building sustainable winners. Windows for most clubs, other than the richest few, open and close quickly. When one does open, as it did for the Orioles in 2023, teams need to pour their resources into the moment rather than trying to foolishly think they can sustain success. Think the 2015 Royals getting veterans Johnny Cueto and Ben Zobrist to finish off the core group. He goes on to say they have some talented young players there, and Gunnar Henderson and Colton Cowser and Westbrook and Rutschman, although he's hitting .221 over the last calendar year. And, I've wondered whether they would actually remove him as a catcher, and would he be of more value if he were a DH or maybe, play first base or something like that. I don't know. But this is a guy who 2 years ago you were saying, oh, man, you got to make sure you lock up Rutschman long term. He's Hall of Fame material. And now he's hitting .221. So it's a mess right now. And I think that the main point that Verducci makes is, you're not the Dodgers. You're not the Yankees. You're not the Red Sox. So seize the moment. You had a team here that made the playoffs 2 years in a row. You needed to go for it, and you have new ownership here. We don't have the battles that you had with the Angelos family. They didn't go for it. The signings that they made have not worked out, and you got one of your top pitchers, Grayson Rodriguez, hurt along with others, and it just has been an absolute mess. And, like Zach Eflin, he was pitching very well this year. He got lit up yesterday. And they're just really scuffling right now. And could it be that a 2-year window, which looks so promising, where they go back to back in making the playoffs, that window may be closing, and it could be another 3 or 4 years if you spend money to get back on track. And Mike Elias, who seemed to be the genius that you're looking for, the Yale grad, maybe he's not the answer. Maybe he's not. Don't know. All right, to the Capitals, licking their wounds after finishing up the season, and some things to talk about as they cleaned out their lockers this weekend. Mainly the future of Alex Ovechkin. He's under contract for another year. Is that going to be it? And if it is, when we close the door on it, we will look back on just an absolutely remarkable era, not just for this area. I think it's even different than the 20 years that Darryl Green played for the Redskins, or all those years that Wes Unseld played for the Bullets. Certain iconic figures in sports here. This is a guy who was and is DC hockey. And this was some of the sentiment that was heard over the weekend as they were talking to the media for the last time before they head off for the summer. Tom Wilson on the season that they had and why it was such a special year.
Reflecting, it gets you a little emotional that, it's hard to make the playoffs. B, it's hard to win a round, and C, to go and have a shot at potentially winning and having such a tight group. You can't take it for granted. And as you move on in your career and you get a little bit older, you realize how hard it is. So I think that really sucks. That feeling sucks at the end of the season, and especially a year and a group like this.
And they did it in a year that we didn't really know what it was going to be like. As is pointed out in the Post story from the weekend, a year ago at this time, the Capitals were at a crossroads. They barely made the playoffs and were swept in the first round by the Rangers, never quite looking like they belonged there. Questions about T.J. Oshie's health and ability to play loomed. Upstairs in the front office, the dual tasks of keeping the Capitals competitive in the twilight of Alex Ovechkin's career as he chased Wayne Gretzky's record and helping the team get younger and fresher seemed to be at odds. But they made a lot of changes, and they had certain additions that made great contributions this year. Logan Thompson, signing him in the offseason was huge, or trading for him. Center Pierre-Luc Dubois was huge. Jacob Chikrin, rookie who's come on and played very well for them. So they've had some big additions. And this was Wilson on how they were able to do this with these additions, with these young players, with the core that they had, along with the focus of this regular season anyway, was to get Alex Ovechkin the Wayne Gretzky record.
It was a crazy season. And the way that, O carried himself throughout the entire thing, and the way that the team rallied around that, and we didn't win the Stanley Cup this year, and it sucks, and that's what we wanted to do. But I think it'll be a fun thing for this team to always cherish and hold together and be a part of, is that journey. It was bigger than the game of hockey, and I think we'll always look back and smile as a group on that moment that O was kind enough to give to our group and to the fans and to the game of hockey. It was pretty incredible, and the whole season, just the energy and rallying around that, and was a pretty cool feeling. It's hard to put into words, but it's history, and I think we'll always remember exactly where we were on the ice and with him and watching that happen. It was pretty cool.
Wilson is the heartbeat of the team, but he is certainly deferential to Alex Ovechkin, who is their top goal scorer and all-time goal scorer and an all-time hockey player in this town. There's no question about it. What about the changing of the guard? What is next season going to be like, if in fact it's going to be his last one, as he heads into the last year of his contract? What are the Capitals? It's hard to think about the Capitals post Ovechkin, and it's almost like Wilson doesn't want to go there.
It's insane how big a part he is of DC hockey and everything he's done here. So it'll be a very weird day when that happens, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Right now, I try to learn, like everybody does in that room, you try and learn and take in anything you can from a legend. He's truly a legend. It's in every meaning of the word. So you just try and learn from him. You try and take anything you can from him. I think we have a foundation right now and a culture in that room, and guys that are signed for multiple years that are leaders in their own way, and we have a very strong group. The last couple of years there was probably some uncertainty as to where the team was going, who was coming in, who was leaving. Right now I feel like we're in a really good spot where we can depend on each other in there and learn from each other and push each other and have a really good culture. So that starts with Ovi. He's put that in place, and a lot of really good players that have come through here over the years, leaving impressions on this group. So we have a really good group in there. I think everyone tries to learn as much as they can from a guy like that, and I guess we'll talk about that day when hopefully doesn't happen for a while, but talk about that when it happens. For now, he's going to keep leading this group, I think, any way he can, or I guess you got to hear from him. I have no idea. I haven't talked to him.
Well, in fact, we did hear from Alex Ovechkin, who is going into the last year of his contract, and I'm not sure we got any clarity.
So last year, your contract next year, is that your intention that that's the last year of your year, or have you thought about that yet?
Be honest with you, I haven't thought about it yet, but we'll see what's going to happen. Obviously, I'm going to try to do my best to be able to do well next year, and how I said, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. So I'll give you a couple of comps on this. One, Darrell Green, who in his 19th year was being hassled by Marty Schottenheimer. Marty didn't want him on the team. It was pretty clear. And in training camp, he's showing Darrell Green how to field a punt. Like in his 19th year, having already returned a punt in the most famous, or his most famous punt return in the Bears playoff game to win that game and send them to the NFC Championship. And he had others over the years. I mean, really, you're going to teach him how to return punts. And they butted heads. Marty wanted him out of there. He was old guard. And Darrell did a very smart thing. He held a news conference and he said, "This is going to be my last year." Meaning, if you want to cut me down, Marty, on my way out, yeah, watch how they react. So he put the pressure squarely on Marty. As it turned out, they got off to a terrible start. They were 0-5, but things turned around. And Darryl Green actually liked playing for Marty's brother, Kurt Schottenheimer, who was the defensive coordinator, and he played pretty well. So he decided to come back for a 20th year and played with the team in 2002. He was running out of gas. He was 42 years old. He could still play, but he wasn't at the level that he'd been in during his heyday, and he retired after that season. But it was one more year when it looked like, it was going to be 19 years. Instead, it was 20 years. And I remember Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He had a farewell retirement tour. I think it was the 84-85 season. He played until 1989. So he played, I think, 4 more years after that. 22 years. 18 years, nobody thought, man, yeah, sure, that's you're leaving early. It seemed like the time. Now, there were reports of some financial trouble and things like that his agent had stolen money from him and things like that. But, he would have found a way to live quite comfortably. He decided to come back and play, and not only play 1 more year, he played 4 more years. So you don't know. Ovechkin, although he's going into the last year of his contract, I wouldn't rule out him playing here for another maybe 3, possibly 4 years. Look, he missed 16 games with a broken leg, and he still had 44 goals. So I think there's a possibility, and guys sometimes talk about retirement, but once they get to it, it's hard to walk away. Bill Belichick said years ago, "Oh, you're not going to see me coaching when I'm in my 70s." Well, he's not only in his 70s, he's moving on to a new career as a college coach, and we'll get to his Michigas coming up. But this was more from Ovechkin as the locker clean out over the weekend, and it's not just that he's coming back for 1 more year. He's coming back on a team that may have unfinished business, that he really enjoyed this, playing in his 20th year with this group, and to be able to have most of that team back is truly meaningful for him.
Yeah, 100%. Because I said it's a special group. It's the chemistry what we built here. It's special, right? How I said, I don't know what's going to happen. Because I'm not a GM, I'm not a coach, and I don't want to guess. I just want to come back for next year and see the team who capable to win the Stanley Cup.
Well, that would be, and look, if they win the Stanley Cup next year, is he going to walk away after that? I don't know. I mean, don't you want to be defending Stanley Cup champions? I think there's that. And if you're still playing at a high level, do you want to walk away? And the other extenuating factor in this is he does say that he wants to finish his career playing in Russia. So does he want to drain the tank completely dry, playing in the NHL before he goes to Russia? Or does he want to have something left when he goes there? But we saw Gordie Howe play at the age of 51. I'm not saying Ovechkin is going to play another decade, but who's to say at 41 that he'll be done? And the way he battles through injury, plays through injury, comes back from injury, a broken leg, and comes back as strong as ever, I wouldn't rule it out. So it may seem like we're going to have this farewell tour next year, but it may not be. It may be several years before we see the end of the Ovechkin era. And I don't think anybody would argue with that if he decides if he wants to play. All right, coming up, Boomer Esiason rips Caleb Williams off this Seth Wickersham story of how he and his dad looked to possibly blow up Chicago and not go there after being picked number 1 in the NFL draft, and where we're going from here as a reporter who covers the Bears for The Athletic points out, it may not be as bad as it seems on the surface. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I don't know how big a Steelers fan you are, or how interested you are in this, but it's May 19th. Do you know where your quarterback is? This Aaron Rodgers thing, what he's done in the last few years, going back to when he first was traded to the Jets, is he's owned the offseason with this odd Greta Garbo-like act. And he does it passively aggressively. He shows up from time to time on the Pat McAfee show, and I'm just doing my thing. I got issues. Maybe I'm going to play. Maybe I'm not going to play. Hey, if they want to move on without me, it's fine. It looks like he's going to go to the Steelers, but what's holding things up right now? They got the off-season workouts going on. They got minicamp coming up next week, and you'd kind of like to know whether it's going to be Mason Rudolph as your quarterback this year or Aaron Rodgers. It looks like it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, but still nothing on May 19th. And the book that's out about Rodgers, written by Ian O'Connor, Rodgers Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. Ian O'Connor was on a radio show in Pittsburgh last week, and I think he believes that this is going to happen, but he's got some interesting insight as to why it has not hhappened yet. He said, I just think verbally behind the scenes, not that he guaranteed it, but he's told the Steelers, listen, I'm going to play for you. I just don't want to go there and then miss part of the mandatory minicamp because of my personal issues. He says, I'm pretty sure they're going to be solved by the end of May, at least in my satisfaction where I can give you my all. He's telling the Steelers. He says, so I think that's where he thinks he is, according to O'Connor. Remember last year, he missed the minicamp for the Jets, saying, forgot we had a trip planned to Egypt, and we didn't know, so he didn't show up. And so O'Connor says he believes that he'll be in uniform for the start of mandatory minicamp. That's June the 10th. June the 10th is where they begin. He says O'Connor also noted Friday that he thinks he has a sense of what the personal issue might be. He says, I'm not comfortable repeating it right now, but I don't think it would prevent him from playing football for the Steelers. So we'll see. I don't even know how good he'll be. He wasn't bad last year with the Jets. The team was bad. They won 5 games. But it just shows you how hard it is to get one of these guys. And it's very difficult to find a franchise quarterback, and they go through all the mishigas that they're going through to get this guy. It's nuts. So you heard about the story last week from Seth Wickersham, part of his book about quarterbacks, that Caleb Williams and his dad were looking at the possibility of doing everything they could not to go to the Chicago Bears, including signing with the UFL, play a year there, and declaring free agency, which would have been really wild. But in the end, they decided that, okay, we're going to go to play for the Chicago Bears and just see how it works out. Well, they got the offensive coordinator fired. They got the head coach fired. And now, finally, he's going to be in his second year with Ben Johnson as his head coach. There was some criticism of this. There was also some defense of this. Like, oh, yeah, well, the Bears are a mess. And as Caleb Williams' dad said, this is where quarterbacks go to die. Okay. And, it's a father protecting his son. Well, not everybody's sympathetic. Boomer Esiason does that radio show on WFAN in New York. This was his take on Friday as to what this Seth Wickersham story told him and what he believes about Caleb Williams.
It's no wonder why he failed initially, and it's no wonder why the coach got fired. So now they go out and get an offensive coach in Ben Johnson, and you know what? Now it's on his ass. It's going to be on his ass to live up to these so-called lofty expectations that he has for himself and that his father has for his son. And I understand, that there could be a discussion, hey, this is where quarterbacks go to die. Well, go fix it. Be the reason that the team is going to turn it around and you be the player that you think you are. And I would just tell him, just keep your mouth shut. You're going into the greatest league that there's ever been for the sport that we all love. You're going to have a chance one day to make $500 million because guys like me and guys before me all went on strike so you could actually make more money. So keep your pie hole shut and go out and play football and earn your keep and earn your respect.
You could say, get off my lawn, Boomer Esiason is 60 years old, blah, 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 blah. But, I think he makes a good point. And, do you think if Caleb Williams wound up here that there wouldn't have been some problems here? And do you think if Jaden Daniels, from what we've been able to observe about him, would have had some of the same issues that he had with the Chicago Bears? I don't think he's about that. And when Caleb Williams tells about not being able to have somebody with him and instructing him how to watch tape, My feeling was Jaden Daniels came into Washington knowing how to watch tape. I watched that series on NIL on Prime, and he's pulling out of his garage at 5 o'clock in the morning to go watch tape at LSU. So I don't know about that. And it sounds like, that you're hearing the same thing from Boomer Esiason. Just shut up. You're not doing yourself any good there. Get yourself better. You got an offensive coach. You better perform right now because you've put a target on your back. He really has. He didn't need to say what he said to Seth Wickersham, but he did. And so, what does that mean now for the Chicago Bears? The one thing I would tell you this, talking to my cousin who's a 40-year season ticket holder, he says the McCaskey family has run this team differently than most franchises. It's still sort of a mom-and-pop operation, and they just don't spend money on coaches. You heard the story of Dan Quinn being brought in for an interview and being flown in coach. That says something to you right there about, NFL teams. If the Bears went up for sale today, they'd sell for $8 to $10 billion. So it shouldn't happen that way in the NFL. And where this goes from here, a lot is going to be on Caleb Williams himself. Kevin Fishbane covers the Bears for The Athletic. He was on the Rich Eisen show last week, hosted by Susie Schuster, who's Eisen's wife, and Colleen Wolfe, who works for the NFL Network. This was his look at the story from Wickersham and what it means for the Bears and Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams is the third first-round pick by the Bears at quarterback in the last 8 years to have to learn a new playbook for his second season. I mean, that's incredible. Like, they drafted Mitch Trubisky, and then they fired John Fox. They drafted Justin Fields. They fired Matt Nagy the next year. They draft Caleb Williams. They fired Matt Eberflus. So Carl Williams and Caleb Williams knew about all this, and they didn't want to be kind of stuck in that same cycle. The Bears committed themselves. They went on this West Coast tour to interview those coordinators. You mentioned Cliff Kingsbury. He could have been an option. And they end up with Shane Waldron. It doesn't work. Doesn't work with Matt Eberflus. We all see what happens. But this is the funny thing about this, is maybe that disaster led them to Ben Johnson. And in a perfect world for the Bears, and nothing's, it's usually not perfect for the Bears, that it will be a footnote and it'll just kind of be something they laugh about, that, hey, it all worked out in the end.
Kevin, the universe works in very odd ways, and I do feel like that is one of the ways that, like, potentially this is a glass half full situation, the way that you're looking at it. But also, Ben Johnson comes with a lot of fanfare, a great resume of what he was able to do in Detroit, and he was the belle of the ball in terms of the coaching hiring cycle this year. So the fact that Caleb Williams, when this came out and when he finally talked to the team and internalized going to Chicago, said, okay, I want to do this. I want to go there, kind of saves himself, obviously, the PR of it all. But now seeing what the team did at the draft and having Ben Johnson there, what do you think that will do for this team, and how different will it look?
It should look a lot different, and I think it's important also to remember what Caleb said. He talked after Ben Johnson's introductory press conference, and Caleb said that he was in his car driving on the highway when he got the call from George McCaskey and Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren about Ben Johnson. He let out a yell. He was very excited. And so this is obviously a quarterback who is looking forward to working with Ben Johnson. He saw what Ben did in Detroit. You talked to all these players, and they kept they kept mentioning, when you thought about the Lions, you thought about them putting up 40 points all the time. And that's something unheard of in the Bears in Chicago, unless you're talking about like 5 pick sixes in a game. So for them to bring in Ben Johnson with, as you mentioned, all that fanfare, and this is somebody who called plays for the best offense in football the past 2 years. You saw what he did with Jared Goff. And you think about what you could do with Caleb Williams, who has a ton of physical abilities. He's still so early in his career. They bulk up the lines. You have Rome Odunze and DJ Moore at wide receiver. You draft Colson Loveland, number 10. Like, there's a lot of reason to think that this could work. Of course, it's Chicago, so it's never that easy. But I think for the Bears to have come away from everything that happened last year, to end up with the coach that was considered the best offensive mind available, is about as good of a way for the Bears to try to move on from that, that excerpt, in a sense, to move on from what that book chronicles. This is what it seems like the best way to do it.
So that seems like a fairly rosy picture painted by Kevin Fishbane, who covers the Bears for The Athletic, that this explosive story about, and we've seen this play out here, the RG3 story, a big chapter of it is the involvement of RG2. There's no question about that. You know, RG3 did it to himself, insisting on staying in that playoff game, hurting his knee. I don't believe that the injury necessarily stunted his career. People come back from ACL injuries. It was more of he deciding that instantly he wanted to become Aaron Rodgers when all reports were he wasn't spending time in the tape room like we see from Jaden Daniels. And that's what quarterbacking is. That's a big, big part of it. It may be even more than 50% of it. Sure, you have to have great physical talent. Sure, you have to be in great shape. And RG3 was always trying to show you what kind of shape he was in, tweeting out videos of him dragging tires in the offseason, and he produced his own comeback video for Gatorade, all in for week one and all that. Now, it's the amount of classroom time that you spend, all the grinding that you do to learn the game, to be able to come to the line of scrimmage and have a pretty good idea what the defense is set up to do against you, audibling out of those things. I don't think he ever got a full grasp on that, and I think that may be part of Caleb Williams' issue in the first year. And saying that I need somebody to sit with me and watch tape and teach me how to do it. Oh, really? When you get to the NFL, this is a job. You know, it's if somebody hires me to do something and pays me, they expect me to know how to do it. They don't need to, they'll help me along the way. Everybody who works in a business as an employee has a boss, but they expect you to have a certain skill level, and it's up to you. And if you're not getting the instruction that you need from the coaching staff, ask for it. Demand it. So, Fishbane, painting that picture of things maybe not being as bad as it seems from the story. As for where it goes from here, as they now begin the new era with Ben Johnson, this was Fishbane again on the Rich Eisen Show Friday.
I think what stood out to me the most were Caleb's quotes in that excerpt. Like, I think what Caleb's father has thought about the NFL and some of the things he said on the record, some of the things you've read, none of that surprised me. I think reading about Caleb Williams kind of expressing interest in getting traded to the Vikings, but then reading that Caleb walked into Hallis Hall and said, you know what, I want this. I want this challenge. I want to be the guy. I don't know if there's anything to worry about. As I said, I think for the Bears, they read that and they go, yeah, like Caleb understood that this was a mess last year, and now we have the right guy. They hope they have the right guy, and now we can move forward. So I'm very interested to see how Caleb Williams addresses this. As someone who's been in the spotlight his entire football career, he's generally been unfazed by the distractions. I mean, again, you think about what he went through last year. He had two different play callers, two different head coaches in his first year in the NFL. The long losing streak, the Hail Mary, that was tough. And now he can kind of start over. So I don't expect there to be any lingering distractions. I'm curious, like, if Ryan Poles and Caleb Williams have a discussion at some point and talk through some of this at all. But I imagine a lot of this wasn't a surprise to them when they saw it. Maybe the timing of it and to see it in the fashion they did could be, again, just they might have to have some conversations, but I think these guys are in a really good spot right now. And everybody in Chicago, I think that's why Bears fans were so bummed out yesterday, because it's a running joke in town that the Bears won the offseason again, and it's something they're pretty good at doing.
Congratulations!
Yay, an April parade. But Bears fans are like, oh, we have all these good feels, these good vibes. Why you got to ruin our vibes, Seth Wickersham? But they also read in like, we know that. We knew that this was a problem last year, and now fans are thinking, okay, hopefully we have the coach that can and the quarterback that can finally get us out of this mess.
It's about time that somebody else won the offseason, right? This is a town where we had offseason champions year after year after year, whether it was rounding up all the former New York Jets with Dan and Vinny sending Redskin 1 to fly them all over the country, and players coming in and asking for $10 million and getting 13, all the nonsense that went on. So it's nice to see this from all this distance away, what's happening with the Chicago Bears and where it goes from here. Look, I think Caleb Williams is going to be a good quarterback, and I'm looking forward to their rematch here. That's a Monday night game in October, mid-October, when they come here, and it could be a totally different result. You know, Caleb Williams could outplay Jaden Daniels, but at this point, clearly Washington has the right guy. And even if Caleb Williams does become a star, I think there's no regrets about taking Jaden Daniels. Tomorrow, I'll get to a column I didn't get a chance to get to today, written by Mike Freeman in USA Today about the program that the NFL has had, the Rooney Rule, for all these years, and how that may be sliding based on what's happening in the current administration. We'll get to that and much more tomorrow. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here in the morning at 9 a.m.